And so I have a bunch of different special guests throughout the tour, and it's wonderful. They're all different. There's some writers and journalists and friends and musicians, and I don't think any of them are quite as much of an idol as the one tonight is. He's a musician that I listened to a lot when I was younger, and I'm very, 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 very excited that he agreed to do this. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Thomas Dolby. So, well, the first thing I asked Thomas, because he read the book, which is amazing to begin with, and I asked him if he had a good part that he dug and wanted to read, and so he picked it. It's a really good one. So I'm going to hand it over to him, and he's going to read a little bit of the book, and then we're gonna throw down some truth bombs.
Can we just tell them a bit of our history first, just to put it in context?
Actually, I didn't even think about mentioning it, but Thomas plays a huge part in the existence of this book, because it's a lesser-known fact, even though I've mentioned it a few times on my blog, that when I first got the little inkling of an idea in my head that I might do a TED Talk, I didn't know anyone who worked at TED. I didn't understand what TED was. I didn't know if TED was a guy or a company. And then I met Thomas and found out that he somehow had an affiliation with TED.
Well, I was the music director, and it was my job to bring in musicians. And generally when I brought in musicians, I'd say, oh, by the way, he or she has got a little TED Talk they like to give in between songs, and they say, no, just have them sing. And
Shut up and sing.
In Amanda's case, she sort of wouldn't leave it alone until I listened to what she had to say. And eventually I had to pull some strings with senior management at TED and get them to consider her as a speaker. And I think they're now very pleased that they did.
Thank you. It's another. I don't think I've ever really talked about this. My original TED Talk was 8 minutes, and it was supposed to be a 5-minute song and a 3-minute talk. And I just kept nagging them until I finally had a 12-minute talk and no song. Anyway.
Years earlier, when my kids were, I guess maybe the eldest of them was a teenager, they used to think that my music choices were pretty lame and old-fashioned, and that they needed to educate me about what was new and original. And my eldest two started raving about this band called the Dresden Dolls. And I said, okay, well, tell me about them. What sort of music is it? And they said, well, it's great, Daddy. It's like punk cabaret. And I said, oh, you mean like Lena Lovitch? And they said, and I'm going, but you soon learn as a parent that you have to keep your lips sort of zipped tight.
You're just inherently uncool.
You're just inherently uncool.
But you're Thomas Dolby. I think you're cool.
Then, and I have to tell this story as well, my daughter, who was then I think about 14, was desperate to come and see you in San Francisco and complained to me that she was too young. You had to be 21 to get into the club. And so at that point, I got in touch with you and said, is there anything you can do? And get this, there was a magician warming up for Amanda, and Amanda got Talia, my daughter, the job as the magician's assistant. And I thought, okay, now I'm finally going to be cool with my daughter. So I just said, Talia, you'll never guess what happened. Amanda has got you into the club as the magician's assistant. And she said, that's so Amanda. And then...
It was an unpaid position.
It was an unpaid position. And then I think the next time I heard from you, I got a frantic phone call saying, I am stuck in the USA, there's an ash cloud over Iceland, and I have to be in London tomorrow night to perform my Evelyn show, which was a new concept to me.
No, I was stuck in Iceland.
Oh, that's right, Iceland.
Yeah, it was after the volcano
then
erupted.
You made it to England, but Skip, who was the impresario in the show, didn't. And so with about, I think, 5 or 6 hours notice, you summoned me to London and thrust into my hands
A script.
Well, it wasn't even a script. It was like a bunch of scraps of paper with stuff written on. And
Script.
you were kind of describing to me what I had to do while you and your partner were climbing into this extraordinary costume. And I waited backstage, frantically trying to follow on these scraps of paper where we were in the show, so that I could make my entry and say something or other.
I think you did a great job.
This is in a pub in West London, and in the backyard of the pub, there was a chicken hutch. And I noticed that the next little scrap of paper that I had said something about a song called Chicken Man. And that during this I had to come on stage and like strum a ukulele or something. And so I grabbed one of these chickens and walked on stage and thrust it under Evelyn and Evelyn's nose.
It was awesome. It's the only venue I've ever been to that has chickens in the back. Bush Hall.
So that was yet one more action group that you probably pissed off with that whole thing.
I think they were fine with it, and the chickens were unharmed.
Okay, so I've just read this book. I think it's amazing. I'm in awe of the fact that you pulled this off. I think it's a really terrific achievement, and these guys will all have read it by this time tomorrow. But I wanted to pick out one bit. I mean, one of the amazing things about this book is that it is how honest and vulnerable you allow yourself to be, which is really awesome. Because I think in a way, you know, the generation of pop performers that I belong to were kind of groomed to keep up this distance from our audience, you know. It was kind of like, no, don't break that wall. Keep your distance, be a little bit aloof. And so it always astonishes me, the stuff that you do. And a lot of them are documented in the book. But there was one particular bit that I really liked, which I thought I would read out. And this was actually about the time when you and Brian had made your first album, first CD, and no labels were interested in it. And so you were packaging, you printed 5,000 copies, and you were packaging them up on your kitchen table and sending them off. And you put up a website for the first time, and you had to go through the mail that you got on your website. And this was the beginning of a trend which would sort of follow you for the rest of your career. But you put up a page on your website with some of the best of the hate mail. So I'm going to read you a couple of pages from Amanda's book. We got a lot of fan mail. Some of it was hate mail, and we built a special page on our website to feature the worst of it. I hand-selected some choice excerpts for the website back in the day. Here's one. You are the worst act I have ever heard. Avril Lavigne is way better than you. But so are the Backstreet Boys, and they fucking blow. You ugly-looking fuck, and the hairy French-looking Chinese chick. Moving on. This shithead at my work, where we have an employee playlist on all the time, keeps putting coin-operated boy on the playlist. I hate you, and I hate her. The female in the band looks like German Gestapo unshaven monkey shit. The dude in the band is a coin-operated child molester. Please eat shit and die. It gets better. The hate mail page included as the centerpiece this letter to the editor in a Boston music zine. It always amazes me how easily impressed Boston audiences are, especially when it comes to an act like the Dresden Dolls. who are not only mediocre as a duo, but totally unoriginal as well. Amanda can't get through a show without trying to shock people, and her piano playing is atrocious. I think your piano playing is really good.
Thanks.
It's obvious that the real brains and the real musician in that band is Brian. Stellar drummer, by the way. Too bad his playing is totally mocked by Miss Palmer. I can't help but wonder if Amanda didn't act like a total ass, or rather an attention-starved daddy's girl, flaunting her flabby, hairy body to everybody and playing herself off to be a performance artist. Would anyone care? I can see how much it pains you even to this day.
It still hurts, actually, hearing it.
The hate mail page became the most heavily trafficked spot on our website. People started writing to thank me for being brave enough to display the nastiness, but it didn't feel brave. It felt like the only option, the only way I could deal with the pain. I still practice this same style of internet jiu-jitsu to this day. I grab the hate and air it out, try to laugh at it, and share it back out into the world so it doesn't eat me alive. Around the same time that we built the hate mail page, I started blogging regularly, sharing the good press, the bad press, and my emotional struggles, riding the I am loved, I am hated yo-yo of praise and criticism, as I tried to simultaneously balance touring, recording, managing the band, and whatever shreds were left of my local social life. I was beginning to learn about online abuse, but as people started to follow my blog by the hundreds, then the thousands, I also had my first taste of crowd power and how double-edged the sword was.
Thank you. And that was back in the day when everyone was just starting to get email, and websites were really rudimentary, and there was no social networking. There were no links that you could click on and follow. Like, everything dead-ended. And it's been I've been talking about internet hate, especially just even in the last few months. It's crazy, the amount, like the proliferation of hate and the speed at which hate goes nowadays. Because, those were really bad, but they came straight to me. And, there were no comments. You couldn't comment on a website back then. So, in a way, it's like watching the internet develop has been like watching this giant mountain of pros and cons stack up next to each other.
Well, and how much does it affect your day if you wake up in the morning and there's a couple of these messages online? Or is it water off a duck's back at this point? Have you become sort of inured to it since those days?
It's gotten way easier to take that kind of criticism. I was talking to a journalist the other day about the book, kind of missing the days when the hate mail was that simple. And actually missing the days when the hate was about my music. Because at least the conversation was on Planet Music. And nowadays, I feel like most of the criticism I get is from people who don't even know that I'm a musician. And I'm like, man, if you're gonna hate me, hate my songs. Because that's what I do, And, I think I talk to so many people about this who are, writers or artists or put themselves out there at whatever level. It always hurts. It's not like one day it becomes easy and you see a hateful comment and someone telling you that you're a fucking cunt and that your music sucks, and it doesn't hurt you. It always hurts. I think it's just a question of how fast you can get rid of it.
And a lot of people that don't have 1 million followers, but maybe have 100, will chime in to an argument, a conversation on the internet, thinking that they are, on the side of right, and get back some hate mail like this, and it really hits them where it hurts. And I just wonder how many millions of people there are out there. Are we breeding a new generation of young people who are walking around kind of trembling in their shoes because they're just worried that somebody out there, some unknown stranger, wants to rip their guts out?
I mean, I think it's not like bullying is new, and it's not like people saying shitty things to you is new. I mean, I grew up with it, and there was no internet. And I think, you know, the thing that I'm curious about, and it's sort of the flip side or the companion to that question, is like, how much do kids feel like they have to perform their own lives for a bunch of critics? You know, Facebook critics or Twitter critics. And, you know, I don't know. I'm not 16. I'm 38. I remember at 16 already feeling like I was totally performing this persona, and it was my hair and my t-shirt and my bag and the brand of my jeans, and like I couldn't walk across a room without feeling completely self-conscious. And I think while, you know, I might have been a little weird and, you know, like a little more self-conscious in that realm because I was a girl or because I was, you know, highly insecure or a performer or whatever, I think that's a pretty teenage. I mean, does anyone else there with me? Did anyone else feel as a teenager like you were just walking around performing your life? So, and I mean, I also remember being in awe of my classmates or friends who were also 16, who seemed to just like roll out of bed in the morning, put on the same polo shirt and pair of jeans and come to school like completely unaware of what they looked like. And I was really impressed by them because I was so, you know, frightened. And the criticism was real. It was there. It was from the other girl over there and from the classmates saying that you were ugly or you were fat or you looked like a drug addict or you looked like a lesbian or whatever. Like, it was there. But it stopped when you got home. Then you had to deal with the criticism of your mother, which is a totally different book. But you know, it was all over the place. The judgment was all over the place. And, you know, I wonder, I do wonder, especially for the artistic types, like the lines have gotten really blurry. You know, it's like, especially if you're just on your phone until the time you fall asleep. You know, where's that space to not be on and not be performing your life?
So in a way, being a pioneer of this sort of new era, really, of two-way communication between an artist and the audience and the world at large, you are a guinea pig in a way, but you're also something of a role model, right? And you probably have more experience than anybody of this stuff. Do you feel that, you know, as you've gotten more experience and you've gotten older and wiser, that you have changed your MO? I mean, you know, do you, for example, you're all about spontaneity, right? But do you, before you blurt something out now, do you tend to stop and think, you know, do you tend to stop and think, you know, is this going to get me in deep shit? Or do you feel that, you know, the unabridged AFP is what you owe to your audience, and so therefore go ahead and blurt it out because that is me, that is raw?
That's a great question, and I've well, no, it's got a really good answer. I am careful. I'm more careful than I used to be because I've stepped on so many landmines without noticing. You know, I think one real misconception of me, because I see it written places all the time, is, especially, you know, by my critics, is that I love stirring up controversy and I love being provocative. And actually, that's just not true. I've never once woken up in the morning and been like, okay, let's start an internet shitstorm. What topic am I gonna pick? And, you know, I think maybe it speaks to my own naivete that I generally, you know, sort of like bumble about my life not thinking that anything bad is going to happen, and then one day I turn around and all of a sudden there's flames and pitchforks. But I have noticed that I have built a really strict filtering system. But the filtering system doesn't just select for what's going to get me in trouble, you know, and what's going to get the feminists pointing their fingers at me, or the critics pointing their fingers at me, or whoever pointing their fingers at me for being naughty. It's actually it's the next section in the book about, you know, sort of realizing that all of a sudden having this voice was a big responsibility. And I also spent a lot of time looking at other people's social media feeds and sort of looking at how other people do it. And the general filtration system is that I just don't want to put anything negative out into the ecosystem. So if I don't like something, especially if it's another artist or another musician or, you know, a film I saw that I didn't care for, I just don't talk about it. I think it's actually a better way to approach the world, to focus on the positivity, or, you know, or to like bring, you know, balanced criticism, but never to settle scores, to start fights, to tear somebody else down, to judge somebody else. It's like, why bother? It's not good for me, it's not good for them, it's not good for the whole ecosystem of the world.
I mean, again, you know, you talked about those landmines. When you're in the public eye, and this is universally true, long before the internet, there were a lot of landmines that people in the public eye could step on, right? If you're a new president, you know, and you trip on the steps up to the podium to, you know, pick up your, you know, in your inauguration speech, the world's gonna see that as a sign of the next 8 years, whether you are Abraham Lincoln or Barack Obama, right? But the internet, a relatively small, innocent, benign comment or photograph or whatever can be distorted and blown up and amplified millions of times. And when you have the kind of reach that you now have at this point in your career, statistically, there's going to be a ton of, you know, for a ton of pros and a ton of cons. You almost can't do right by everybody. It's almost inconceivable.
You kind of have to just not care. And what's interesting is the less you care and the less you try to present a perfect image, the less interested you know, that realm of humanity is in you, period. And I actually only really started realizing this recently, that I could have shaped my career completely differently if I had chosen to. You know, I could have always gone out in public with perfect makeup and amazingly coiffed hair and worked with fashion designers to always wear, I mean, I've been wearing this dress to every show for like 3 years. And, you know, worked with fashion designers to like be a aesthetic, visual part of that world. And because I just didn't do it ever, that whole part of the world of like magazines and paparazzi and things, they just ignored me and ignored the band as if we were a non-entity. And I look back at that and I'm like, thank God. Seriously, because if you present as, you know, and it's what, and I have my lots of complicated feelings about someone like Lady Gaga, but one thing I think she did that really was beautiful is that, you know, even though you could make lots of arguments that she has applied herself to the beauty standard, like, you know, up to the top of the cliff, she at least has also, unlike Madonna, who was sort of like that version of her, you know, a few decades before, she wanted to let the cracks show. She knew that it was a better way to win the game, to be like, nope, you can't, like, if you want to go like photographing my underwear in the trash, I'm just gonna like take it out and wave it in your camera, you know. And that actually, like, that's another one of those jujitsu moves that nowadays you're better off exposing yourself than trying to have this mask, because the mask just isn't gonna work. Everyone knows it's bullshit.
And a lot of that is because the tech has kind of torn up the rule book, right? And you know, I just wonder whether, like, okay, recently Beyonce released an album apparently on the spur of the moment. We weren't warned about it, and it debuted at #1 and so on. And that was an example of the old world machinery, you know, still continuing to work. But many of the landmarks in music, let's call it commerce, of the last few years have been ones that broke the mold, like Radiohead releasing In Rainbows for, you know, whatever you wanted to pay, like like U2, putting their album on your iPod whether you wanted to or not.
Or U2.
Like the album which you made using money that you raised from Kickstarter.
Right.
And these are all really breaking the mold. And I sometimes think, well, okay, I don't know where this is going. I think maybe the labels are going to respond by putting out a CD for $10 with a $20 note popped into it. But I also, you know, when I think about songs or artists that really inspired me as a kid that I feel did actually change the world, you know, that did leave a lasting legacy. I don't know, Imagine, Bohemian Rhapsody, Space Oddity, whatever it may be. And I wonder if a song like that can ever happen again. And I wonder, in fact, you know, now with the platform that you have, can that ever happen to you? And can you leave a lasting legacy on the world that's not all about the internet, you know, to and fro? It's
about the music.
It's about the music.
I think it's all about scale. And I think we're moving, at least in the realm of music that touches people and hits people, we're definitely moving away from the era of the blockbuster. But I'm actually really, even though I've been doing this for a while, I'm still so grateful to play to a room of this many people who are listening to the music. I'm like, it's enough, it's fine. It's not like I'm dissatisfied because you guys aren't an arena or a stadium. This is incredible. And I think it's sort of a question of like, what's enough? You know, I don't need the entire world to know Imagine. And honestly, I think if you went to certain parts of the world, like, you know, head to West Africa and ask, you know, how many people know Bohemian Rhapsody? Like, some people might, but, you know, so it's like a question of reach and scale and like, what do you need as a writer and a, you know, songwriter or musician to be satisfied? And if you're not going to be satisfied until every fucking human on earth knows your song, that's a little difficult. So then it's just a matter of scaling back, and that actually, I think that's kind of the mark of a great artist, is if you really can find satisfaction. If you really are satisfied playing to a bar of people, or a circle of people around a fire at a party, or, you know, a room this size, and you love it, then you're supposed to be a musician. You know? Do you want to do some questions?
I thought I was going to come and do this and you were going to be Oprah, but it turns out that I'm like Conan.
We're trading. Oprah. Copra.
So you asked me to pick some questions from out of the Ask Amanda bag in front. And,
Yes.
I think a lot of them we've actually covered because a lot of people want to know the same thing, which is...
Great, we'll skip those.
Okay, we'll skip. All right, so here we go. So Crystal asks, was there a story that you had to cut from the book that you wish you could have told?
Yes.
They're all sworn to secrecy, by the way. So
I cut a shit ton from the book. I originally wrote, I didn't understand word counts before I started writing this book. Are there any writers in the house? There's got to be a handful. Okay, you're all on this side. I sat down in February at my computer in Melbourne, and over the course of about 8 weeks, I wrote 5,000 words a day. And here's the thing though, I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have to run a house, I escaped my husband, I just like woke up, had a coffee, had another coffee, usually had 3 coffees, and then wrote, and then just wrote until I collapsed. And I mean, the entire book was written in about 2 or 3 months, and then I painstakingly edited it for another couple months. By the end of the day, it was 150,000 words, which is a lot of book. It's like The book, as you see it, which is 300 some odd pages, is 90,000 words. So it was almost twice as long. And the first thing I did with the first manuscript, with all those 150,000 words in a kind of a different order than they are now in the book, is I gave it to Neil. And I did this. I had the manuscript printed out, and I went, and he took a pen. This is trust. This is a real love relationship. He took a pen and he crossed out 60,000 words. And I told him that I trusted him. He's a pretty good writer. I told him that I trusted him so much that I would let him work with my editor, get it down to about 90 or 100,000 words, and that I would reread it, and I wouldn't look at what he cut. And I did. And if I wanted to put it back in the book, I had to know and remember what was cut, go back, search for it, reinsert it, and then fight for it. And a lot of that stuff that I reinserted got batted away by my editors, and were like, and there were a lot of stories I really wanted to. There was a great story that I fought for like 5 times about this woman who came up to the 8-foot bride. It was like one of those things where I finished a performance and I got down off the crate, and this really nice-looking woman, probably in her 40s or 50s, well-dressed, came up to me and said, "Thank you for doing this in Harvard Square." And I was like, thank you for coming and saying hi. And she said, "I just wanted you to know, I think that you standing on that box as a symbol of white power is so significant, and you're doing so much good work for the cause." And I was like, thank you. That was fucked up. Everybody made me cut that from the book. But now I got to tell the story, so it's all good.
If you could write an episode of Doctor Who, what would it be about?
If I could write an episode of Doctor Who, I think I would bring in Jodie Foster to play the Doctor. And her companion would be David Tennant. Because he's cute.
And the plot?
The plot? They'd go around killing lambs. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. They would, they'd fuck the patriarchy. I don't know. I'd crowdsource it. I would just have everybody take a vote on the plot, and then I'd drink a case of wine and write it.
If anyone has scissors, can I get a lock of your armpit hair to make a necklace for
No.
my girlfriend Mina, who is here with me?
We're in a synagogue.
Jamie.
You guys are fucked up. If you get in the book signing line, I'll just pluck one out and tie it in a ribbon for you. You weirdo. I want to ask you something before we wrap it up. You're teaching here now. You're local.
Yeah, I'm teaching at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore.
Really? Can you, so that you've transmitted your information to these people, especially if they have youngsters heading to Johns Hopkins, can you tell them what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm teaching music for film at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, which is a beautiful old building. But my other sort of dual role there is that we've been given an amazing endowment to build a new media center in Station North, which is the original arts district of Baltimore. And we've brought up this amazing Art Deco cinema from the 1930s called the Center Theater. And it's going to be gutted and filled with a TV studio, film edit suites, music recording studio, and a screening room, which Johns Hopkins Hospital is going to wire with polygraph equipment and EEG and ways to measure an audience's response to film and music. And they're going to gather data.
The singularity is coming. That's awesome.
So I'm helping design that center and the courses that go into it. And my wife Kathleen and I have moved to Baltimore for 2 to 3 years from England, and she's here tonight. She's up in the gallery and is pointing a video camera at us at this very moment.
Well, welcome your new neighbor, Thomas Dolby.